good afternoon, and I can't tell you how delighted I am to be here. I'm sure everybody in this room has seen a gaur, so this picture is not even necessary. And it's actually from a video which has gone viral, actually. About 20 of these gaur are walking right through Wellington. And I've just taken a snapshot from that. And it just goes to show that, they have adapted so well to human situations now. And so the interaction is so much greater. I have been here for the past 15 years or so. I have been coming and going. I'm not a resident, unfortunately, but I'm a part resident, I would say, of the Nilgiris. I've been coming to Kunur for the past 15 years, at least every year, 3 or 4 times. And when I used to first come here, seeing a gaur was quite interesting, It used to be like, oh, how nice, there's a gaur, which I can see, and I'm, quite excited and interesting, not a commonplace event at all. Nowadays, there's a gaur standing at my doorstep. So that is a difference that has happened in the past 12 to 15 years. And in my mind, that is quite dramatic, really. But if we go a little back into the past, if we go actually quite a lot into the past, say about 80 years ago, and see what the situation there, I'm quoting from the famous Book of Indian Animals, which was written around 1948 by the author S.W. Prater. Then look what he says. He says, gaur are timid animals by nature and they fear and avoid man. Then he says their usual impulse on the approach of man is immediate flight, to run away. And except for rare stragglers, gaur keep away from human habitation. Now, what to contrast the picture that we saw just a little while ago. And they say, very importantly, they do not enter cultivations or feed on crops. So this is about 80 years ago, and you can see that there is a situation at that time was like that. If you come a little nearer to our times, about 60 years ago, the celebrated wildlife photographer and expert M. Krishnan, he did a 10-year survey of wildlife in India. And over the 10 years, he recorded and very detailed work on wildlife in India. And this is what he says about gaur, specifically in the Nilgiris. So he says Nilgiris must be the best place for gaur in the whole world. And I think that still applies. I mean, it's such a good population of gaur here, and they're doing very well in the Nilgiris. Still now they have good habitat. So it still applies. Then he says, gaur are far-ranging animals moving in herds over considerable forest area as seasonal needs require them to. Now, the key words here are really forest area and seasonal needs. So both these are not applicable now. For instance, they are moving through habitations as well, and cultivation, not necessarily forest areas. And seasonal needs are not so crucial because they have food throughout the year by way of cultivated crops. And, that is not so, made me mistaken, but I thought this was not the case right now, that they can be here throughout the year, not necessarily having, serious migration they used to have before. Then he said they need extensive grounds because forests are now much less continuous than they were in the past, and their distribution discontinuous. So distribution, even those days, 60 years ago, 1960s, more than 60 years ago, the distribution was already, not continuous. So you can imagine now with the kind of fragmentation of forests that have already been talked about. I mean, I don't even need to go into that. So many speakers have already spoken about it, that the forests are fragmented. And so you can imagine how much their habitat has been dislocated now, they're disturbed now. So if we look at human-gaur interaction in the Nilgiris, I would say there are 3 different types. There are 3 different ways of interaction. One is, of course, the human-gaur conflict. And then the threats to gaur. Now, we shouldn't forget that gaur is Schedule 1 on the Wildlife Protection Act. It's a protected species, and it's also classified as vulnerable. So we have a responsibility to protect the animal. So there are threats to gaur as well. Then there's coexistence, and there are shades of coexistence. There's tolerance, there is just acceptance. So we have to look let's look into all these three to some extent if we can. So, okay, what are the major areas of conflict? Already, I think Sir has mentioned quite a lot. Our DFO Sir has already mentioned the main areas of conflict, but I will just go over it in a brief way. So crop damage is, of course, apparently from some literature, reading 15 different types of crops are badly affected, if I'm right, Sir. Yeah. And there have been studies on which ones are more affected, which are less affected. And I don't like to use the word crop raiding, but I would say crop damage and crop consumption is a very, very serious thing. It's causing loss of livelihoods for a lot number of people. Human injury, human death, extremely serious, and it is being caused by gore. This is the human aspects of the conflict that needs to be addressed in a very big way in rural and urban areas, as well as workers in tea plantations and tourists, the kind of tourists that even Tash was talking about, the ones who take pictures. They put themselves at risk, and they are vulnerable to a lot of attack and injury and death as well. Then there's damage to property, which even Gaur are responsible for damage to property. And there's this fear, there's this general fear, let's not step out at night because there may be a Gaur. It could be Gaur, it could be other animals as well, but definitely for Gaur, there's a feeling that, even I myself don't feel like getting out of onto the road sometimes outside my house because the Gaurs, it's kind of like a nice pathway for Gaurs, the place where I live. So what are the threats to Gaurs? As I said before, it's a vulnerable species. It's even though we see them prolifically out here, it's not. I mean, if you look at the whole of India, it's concentrated out here. So, but what has human done? Though this is a very telling statement by Prater, who wrote the Book of Indian Animals. He says, man is the biggest threat. And that is true. When you say man, he means humans, of course. And it is humans' activities, our population boom, our habitations, our way of life, our cultivations, our infrastructure, all that are definitely a threat to Gaur, and their natural fodder, their natural habitat has got fragmented on account of us. And the loss of grasslands. I mean, just 2-3 days ago, Dr. Ravi Chellam circulated a wonderful link to some old maps that were discovered, right, of the grasslands all over Nilgiris, extensive. And now, then they compared it with the present day satellite imagery, and they've gone. Grasslands have gone. So, I mean, Gaur is a bovine. It wants grass. So, the grassland is one of its major habitats, and therefore, if we have removed the grasslands, as it's already been mentioned, I don't even need to talk about it. They've been converted to wattle and eucalyptus. That is definitely loss of their fodder, their natural food. Then blocking of Gaur pathways and corridors, their normal way that they walk. So, I mean, obviously, Wellington, which must have been some kind of a pathway. I don't know where they were going. Obviously, there was nothing for them to eat over there. But they were going through, and that had been blocked by habitations, by illegal fencing, maybe extensive fencing, I don't know. But definitely their pathways are not there. And then domestic cattle. Apparently in 1968, the entire huge loss of Gaur population was there when there was rinderpest, there's rinderpest epidemic in Gaur. But they have revived, fortunately. But still, because livestock and Gaur are feeding in the same area, there's a lot of risk and danger to Gaur of diseases, cattle-borne diseases. So that we've finished the two of them. Now we come to coexistence and tolerance. Actually, there is a lot. There is a lot of tolerance and acceptance and coexistence right now. And for instance, earlier there was, say, 100 years ago, there was a lot of hunting of Gaur, and that has been reduced a lot because of strong measures, legal measures, as well as people have stopped that activity of hunting so much now. And there's tolerance even among tea estate workers. If the Gaur come into tea estates, they just browse over there, the grass is out there, and they encounter the tea pluckers, the tea workers. And I must tell you an incident that I was walking along in a tea estate just for fun one day, and I was talking to one of the tea pluckers. And so she said, Amma, anga pohadengo, anga oru gaur irkaru, anga bison irkaru. So I was very impressed. She used the word, the respective term, irkaru is a respective term, which you use for an elder person or for somebody whom you value. So she just said, அது ஒன்றும் பண்ண மாட்டாரு, நீங்க முள்ளா போயிடுங்க. So just, it won't do anything much to you. You just go ahead. So it's that kind of, tolerance and a feeling that, okay, it's there. It also needs to be there. You just be careful. That's what. So then there's coexistence and acceptance among the rural and tribal people, as already was mentioned by other speakers before me. Among the rural people, and the tribal people, they have been living with them all along. Tashrishna shows some very moving slides of how people are living with them, and they have lived with them for earlier years, and they even cultivate and they still live with them. So all this is still there. All this is still there. Now, we're coming to actionable points, is what was the mandate of this Nilgiris conference as well. So many action points have already been talked about. Actually, my task is very much easier because I think almost everything that I have to say now has already been said before. But there's no harm in re-stressing some of these things, just to make sure that they are understood and they are up to the point. So we have to first mandate is policy and guidelines. And the policy should be safety of humans and animals and their welfare, both. And so there has to be a kind of a vision and a policy which has to put in place. Now, the IUCN does have guidelines for conflict mitigation and for promoting coexistence. So those could be gone into, some of those guidelines, actionable and doable points, not just things in theory, but things that can be actually done. And that could be looked into seriously to see how that can be adapted to the Nilgiris. And again, I think Mr. Behr also mentioned that there have to be multiple stakeholders in a Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve. The stakeholders have to be all involved in decision-making, in consultation, across the board, all people from all walks of life, from the rural and the tribal people, right up to businesses. And this is really important. The mining, already Pratim talked about mining and talked about big businesses and whether a mall should come up or not. These kind of things, and if it is to come up, where can it come up? Where it will not impact either local people or the local ecology or the local wildlife. So these can be only done through massive consultation, something like this, in fact, something like the naturescapes that is being done, which is something that I admire so much. Then we have to also remember that on a very long, futuristic thought, or on a very, shall we say, long term, we may have to change a lot of our social structures. We may have to change the way we live. We may have to change the way our lifestyles. We may have to do that and we may also have to have some ecological restructuring as well. I should say where we live, how we live, all those kind of things may have to be done in the future as a long-term plan. And then we cannot ignore climate change. We have to foresee what could happen. Now, in the past 80 years and the past 60 years, if God behavior has changed so much, as what Plato said, that the first thing that God does is sees you is run away. It's so different now. If that change has happened the past 80 years, what's going to happen in the next 80 years? When there'll be climatic changes, there will be vegetation changes, and the Gaur's movements will again change very much more. Maybe it could be for the positive because of restoration. They could be, there could be better fodder for them, maybe. So we don't know. So we have to predict. We have to foresee that there are going to be changes. And as Rohini said, we have to live with changes always. And we have to plan for changes as well. So I've kind of categorized the actionable points into 3 parts. One is policy and guidelines. Next is for what government and administration can do. Now, again, my task has been very much helped by, in fact, the summary that was put up this morning. It almost covers all these points that I've already put down a few days ago. So what can government administration do? Government is already doing a lot. Forest Department is already doing a lot by way of mapping hotspots, by way of giving compensation, and so many other matters. And even the Revenue Department, the collector, the police, all the government people, the administration, they're all doing very good work. So this has to be strengthened. This has to be strengthened and scaled up, as we talked about in the previous in the morning, scaling up all the good work that is being done already. Then there should be training programs really that are done for people from every sector that is working over here, whether it's industry, whether it's education, whether it is science, whether it is municipality, whether it is the people who are signing off, giving permits for land use. All these people need to be trained to factor in ecological considerations in whatever they are doing. Then rural communities have to be empowered really to speak out. Their voices really need to be incorporated into management plans, and they should have the power to be able to resist, say, infrastructure is coming in their area, a dam that's coming in their area. They should be able to have the power to resist it if they feel it's not good for them. I certainly feel that empowerment is so necessary. They do have a voice, but perhaps that voice needs to be louder and incorporated into all government plans and any kind of development activities that are going in. And very stringent disposal of waste. Now we are, of course, Nilgiris is really a model in many ways for waste management. And that needs to be strengthened a lot. Both government and NGOs are doing it. And I went to Samantha's wonderful waste disposal unit. It's really brilliant work that's being done. But at the same time, whatever is done doesn't seem to be enough. Because, local people are much more conscious people. But Nilgiris is a place where influx of people from all over the place, and they are not at all as conscious. They don't have an ownership of the place. So they need to realize that, disposing waste is really bad. And whatever waste is already being generated right now, because of, plastic covering for all our food matter as well, which is very good, actually. It's a good thing that our foods are being protected. But that disposal is not there. That disposal, maybe businesses who are actually manufacturing products that have to be covered in plastic, they need to step in the picture and find out some disposal of their own kind of products. And then state-of-the-art tracking and monitoring. This is what the government will have to do to give early warning systems and to find, that now that technology has come up so high, incorporate all those technological methodologies into management. So this is my last slide. Ravi, don't worry. I'm not going to go very far beyond the time that you have given me. So let's see the action that can be implemented by NGOs and citizens and by academia as well. So I think huge research has to be done on, mapping and survey has already been talked about, already being done, but maybe more of that. Study behavioral studies of the Gaur, its feeding patterns, its movement patterns, its breeding patterns, its feeding patterns, what it likes, what doesn't like. Maybe what doesn't like would be helpful to help farmers to grow crops that are not consumed by Gaur. Then that will help them financially as well as it will help the to keep the conflict under control. And then behavioral studies, I said, and sociological studies. What's the best practices? What are people doing already? How are people dealing with the situation of Gaur in their vicinity? And what are the best and what are the bad practices? What are the practices that are not good that are being done? So these all to be put together to devise, along with people from all walks of life, a good practice. And then public awareness. And with public awareness, a lot of changes can be brought about. A lot of things that are for instance, things that are happening in the wrong place, or as habitations coming up in the wrong place, or behaviors that are not good. All that can be tackled with public awareness. And I think that is something that NGOs or the citizens can do. So, folks, there's a It is a huge basket of work to be done, and it should be done. And I think the triangulation is what is important between scientific inputs. Everything has to be done in a scientific manner, and with government and with people, and for the animals and for the people themselves. I think triangulation of all these things, citizens, scientists, and government working together to make the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve into the beautiful place that it is to continue to be. Thank you so much.